Hello, welcome to the PPC Gals podcast. So Ameet and I are here once again. We have been working in paid search, specifically platforms like Google Ads for nearly 30 years now combined. It feels like a lifetime in this industry, doesn't it?
It really does. Honestly, these days it really does.
I mean, we've seen it evolve from like keyword bidding, like 30,000 keywords, to AI landscape that we're in today. And recently, Google Ads made some changes that I've heard people talking about, like with the ad auction. And to be honest, I'm a bit lost because I haven't really been following along with people screaming about it. And so today I'm hoping that you are able to shed some light on this. So before you start to shed light and I start asking all the silly questions, let me just give a little bit of a basic overview of the auction as I see it and how I explain it to clients, and then I'll have you fill in the gaps. So essentially with the ad auction, we are bidding at the keyword level. And I'm talking specifically with search, right? So when people come in, what they think of as paid search, I want to buy the word trucks in Google Ads. We are bidding on that keyword and we're placing that keyword at a cost per click. So I can bid, $5 or $10. Now, what the documentation says, although it's confusing, is that you pay, I think, like a penny less than the highest click. Something confusing, but it doesn't always feel that way. So like if I bid $10 and the advertiser below me bids 8, I would pay like 8. If I were below it, I would pay, God, I don't know, because it's based on my quality score and all types of secret factors. But the reality is, I think what I want the main takeaway to be is that it is an auction and we're bidding on keywords, and then we're trying to make our keyword and our landing page and everything look really good. So Google says, yes, you can pay less than what you're willing to pay.
Yes. So that's still correct, except it's no longer auction, it's auctions.
Auctions. Was that the
Yep.
change?
That's the
Or was that my
change.
definition that was wrong? Okay.
No, that's the change.
Okay. So I
So
want you to
Google,
talk about this.
yeah, Google very secretively updated their documentation. I don't know when they did. I just know that they have. And what it now says is that when someone searches on Google, we run different auctions for each ad location. So for example, top ads are selected by a different ad auction from ads that show in other ad locations. Your ads will only show once in a single ad location, but across ad locations, your ads can show up more than once. So what that actually is saying, if you start reading not even reading between the lines, what it's telling us is that each ad location has a separate auction. So your top ad has a separate auction, your location maps has a separate auction. Obviously, LSAs in their own right have their own auction. The ones that you see at the bottom have their own auctions. We don't do side ads anymore, right? Those were permanently taken out.
Correct.
Yeah. So then if there was side ads, that would be a separate auction in itself.
So I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, I bet.
So my first question is, I don't pick my auction when I bid on a keyword. I'm not like, hey, I just want to bid among the top spots. I don't want. So how did using the word auctions change? Are they saying I could be in the first spot and the second spot?
No. So you could be in the first spot and then like the first spot in the bottom.
Yeah.
So like number 4, 5, 6.
As I was asking that, I kind of realized. So what you mean is you can be in the first spot, and then since we have that scrolling, you can see those ads appear down at that bottom. And it's sort of, is it like technically an infinite scroll at this point? Because like the ads will kind of refresh and be there at the bottom, but it's not like the true bottom on mobile.
See, on mobile, I'm not super sure. I know on desktop, it still has the pages. It's not the infinite scroll. At least it's not for me. So like for me, it goes top ads, maybe the map pack, organic listings, and then underneath they have the ads again, where then I can go off to page number 2, 3, 4 if I wanted to. I'm not too sure on the mobile side of things how that's impacted, because I know that Google has like interwoven the ads in the mobile side of things, or even on desktop, but more so on mobile. So we might just continue just seeing that. It might just continue to just be infinite.
Okay, so I'm gonna do a test here while we're talking. So like I'm looking for something very specific, a turn board for my kid who dances. Okay, so I searched, and I know the brand, so I search a brand. I'm looking for a dot to dance. Okay, and I see sponsored at the top, And then I see sponsored Great Mats, another sponsored Dot to Dance, another sponsored Dazzle Distributors. It's tough to be because I'm going to click on each one of these and be like, which one's different? Like, sorry.
Pricing differences, quality,
Right.
review. Yeah,
Yes. Yes. And what's interesting is these may not, so like Dazzle distributors may not be bidding on Dot to Dance directly. That may be one of their PMAX's ads,
it could be, yeah.
So keep in mind that's where competitors will slip in. Sorry, I'm explaining paid search. Okay. So I scroll down, I see Amazon, who's not paying, they're number one. Discount Dance. Okay. Instagram, their Facebook. I see videos. I scroll down, I see more images. I'm still scrolling, by the way. And I come back and I see sponsored again.
There
and
we
I now
go.
see Amazon, and people also search for, and then I hit more search results. I get more product ads sponsored.
That makes sense. So then basically when you scroll for more, it's just starting that new
Yeah,
page
you're
essentially,
exactly right.
Yeah. So yeah, so that's basically what's going to end up happening on that side. But the one thing that a lot of people haven't realized, and neither did I up until actually a couple days ago, is that Google's been very secretively experimenting double serving ads since late 2024. So like December, I think it was. So what that means is that now, because we have separate auctions for all of the placements, if let's say Coca-Cola wanted to run ads, they could literally show up at the top and at the bottom because of the double serve and because of the two different auctions that are happening. So they could beat out competition on both sides, which is, I don't like it. I'm going to be honest, I don't like it. I hate this more than anything actually not more than anything in the world, but I really do hate this. And there's a number of reasons as to why. Jenny's already gone on record and said that an impression is an impression. Like, so the way that impressions work does not change. If you see the Coca-Cola ad at the top and then you see the Coca-Cola ad at the bottom, those are two impressions.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right.
Right?
Correct.
That logic makes sense. But then when we put in CTR in part of this conversation, it's kind of a shitty deal if you think about it. Because we have two impressions off of one search and one click, which makes it 50%, not 100%.
You're right.
So now our CTR is going to take a hit, right?
Correct.
So then we take that even further and we start looking at like something that Chris Chambers brought up earlier today with me was auctions in insight reports. How do those work now? And from my viewpoint, they're basically not a resource that we can use anymore. And there's a number of reasons as to why. First, the impression share side of things is going to be inflated. It's less reliable. So if we have, let's say, like a single advertiser who takes up multiple slots, that's going to inflate their impression share pretty artificially. Then over top of it, the thing that pisses me off the most is that we're not going to be able to tell what is a unique impression and then what is a double served impression.
Yeah, okay.
So it's just going to be, again, like this inflated number. Like we are going to have no freaking idea. And from when I'm looking at it from like a client standpoint, naturally, let's say we see a 15% increase by next week or something like that. The client's going to sit there and be like, oh my gosh, there's more people searching for my brand or my product and all of this stuff.
You're right.
Why is my CTR going down and why is my conversion rate going down? Shouldn't it theoretically be kind of going up a little bit? Or like they're going to look at us and basically be like, why aren't you doing your jobs? Essentially.
Yeah, like it resets the metrics behind the scenes without us like really knowing it resets the metrics. Because you're right. Like I've now seen Dazzle distributors 1, 2, or that was organic. So I'm counting.
You might not see it because it's not a fully rolled out thing. It's still very much an experiment. But I believe it was a couple of days ago, Anthony Higman actually posted
I've seen it
a screenshot
twice.
Where he saw 3 for his client.
I have seen it. I've seen it 2 times. But now that I think, so I have another one. The second advertiser I've now seen 1 time and 2 times, 3 times. But it's different products. So it's products. So you know who it's probably going to hurt the most? E-com.
Yep.
E-com. And e-com is where, as human beings, we tend to click the most, especially in these like, and I'm going to say them, not necessarily, I don't want to say niche, but like highly intentional, specific things, right? So like I always talk about dance, right? Because not only is that what my kid does, but it's what when I want something very specific, it's where I do the most volume of searches on something that I hate saying it, but isn't that expensive because I'm looking for something very, very specific, right? Like a costume that has this cut, this shape, this color, this like fabric sheen, right? Which means I'm like clicking and clicking. And also, like everything else in the world, it's become so centralized that there's a couple main companies and I want something more custom. So I'm like clicking and I'm like, is that right? Blah, 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 and you think like, these are like let's just say like $100 to $150 like base costume that I'm looking for because I'm going to do something to it after. I'm like, that's not much margin for me to be clicking on those ads 200 times, for weeks on end. I made up 200, but I mean, probably clicking on those ads a lot is taking away from the return for those clients.
And then on the flip side, you might see like a decrease in impressions because your competitors are showing up multiple times in a search query too.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Which wouldn't necessarily be a good indication of what the market is doing or what your audience is doing. It's just what Google is doing. So there's like two sides to that end of it. But then when we go further into the auctions insight report, that's where I kind of become more, what's the word for it? I guess confident in like me saying that this report is basically kind of useless now, as horrible as that might sound. Because even on the overlap rate side of things, if one advertiser is appearing twice, that again inflates the overlap rate, but that doesn't mean that they've actually increased their ad spend or even changed their strategy. And this is where I feel like it's very sneaky. And I hate that I'm always assuming that Google is doing something bad. But like what this spells out for me is that they're trying to find ways to dupe advertisers into spending more money.
Right, because
Because
you
I
think your
naturally, like, if
competitor
I was an
is. Yeah,
inexperienced like
yeah.
advertiser, I would see an overlap rate increase and I'd be like, holy smokes, they've added spend. I'd see an impression increase on their end and I'd be like, holy smokes, they really are going for it. So then I would end up going back to my client and be like, you know what? Okay, so we're losing impression share here. Overlap is this. If we put in position, gosh, what is it called again? Position above rate into all of it, then if we have an advertiser taking up 2 spots, that'll automatically increase their position above rate because they have 2 spots. And then we take outranking share? Yes, outranking share. I should know these off the top of my head. But then we take outranking share, and then that metric becomes harder to interpret because, again, that same advertiser is showing above and below you, and we don't know if they are or not. There's no metric to tell us that. So now we've got this report that's basically telling us that our competition has increased and that they're spending more money. We're naturally going to end up doing the same thing, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I guess to counter that point, I would say if you had more budget, wouldn't Google automatically show it in more options? If you didn't have the budget to spend, maybe you wouldn't get as many impressions because behind that is if they think that click will result in a conversion, they should be showing your ad anyway, and they would show your ad more frequently.
But what if you're competing against a brand like Coca-Cola?
Well, if you're competing against a brand of Coca-Cola, even without duplicate auctions, you were kind of screwed anyway. I hate to say it. Like,
To a certain degree, I just feel like this is just going to allow larger advertisers to take up more space and just like kind of mess with like the small business owner really at this point. And that's kind of where I get a little pissed off because it's like before, I mean, admittedly, like it is a partly price auction. The highest bidders to a certain degree does win, but it's still somewhat like it was the most fair that we could possibly get it to. And now I feel like this is just completely giving all of the cards and the chips to like larger advertisers and then being like, okay, well, you smaller guys are just completely screwed. So then at this point, if we look at it from like a business model standpoint, I go, okay, so you give, let's say Coca-Cola all the cards and go, here, dominate the search engine, right? Eventually at some point there's going to be fatigue. Eventually at some point everyone else is going to want an alternative, but that alternative might have left your platform by then because they were sick and tired of spending more money and getting less return. So then eventually Coca-Cola is going to realize that and then decrease their ad spend because they don't have as much competition in the market anymore. So this could really flip pretty hard for Google. I don't know in what case, in what way, but like I can see this like kind of imploding in front of their faces.
Okay, that was really confusing, I'll admit. So do you know what I did? I asked ChatGPT to tell me what their thoughts were. So I
Fair.
said, because it just to me feels confusing. It really does.
It is very confusing.
And it was already a confusing auction. So I said, if Google Ads runs one ad auction and now runs multiple ad auctions, how does that impact PPC advertisers? Probably oversimplified it. So according to ChatGPT, and I am using Gemini, they said the shift from a single ad auction to multiple ad auctions in platforms like Google Ads significantly impacts PPC in several ways. And it said more auction opportunities, right? So multiple auctions means there are more chances for ads to appear, but also instances where advertisers must compete. It can lead to increased complexity, which we've already covered because it's very hard to articulate this. If you and I, as paid search auction experts, are sort of grappling with this change, explaining it to a client, it's going to be even more confusing. And I think that
And explaining why the CPC has gone up and how you're competing against yourself.
Yes.
Remember when we used to
Yes.
have ad groups where
Yes.
they had like the same
Yes.
keywords?
Yes, yes. And, it basically said heightened competition, likelihood of facing increased competition, drive cost up, of course. And then it said impact on bidding, a need for granular bidding. Advertisers need to adapt to granular bidding strategies to optimize for performance across auction types, which requires a deeper understanding. But to your point, like when you think about, and I'm thinking out loud here, the cross contamination that we see across campaigns that sometimes happens inadvertently, potentially you could show two different, right, from different like your search campaign ad, which you've deliberately placed, and then your PMAX campaign, your PMAX search. But I would assume Google hasn't been all bad about this. Usually when they're confusing updates like this, they do over the next couple months come out with more and more answers to these questions when advertisers or paid search experts ask them with the intent to understand.
Yeah, I think just for me, it's just irritating because they kind of just swept it under the rug. They started the experiment, didn't really tell anybody. Then they
Yes.
went and updated this auction explanation, didn't really tell anybody. And then when I believe it was Barry Schwartz who actually originally like wrote about this and then posted it on LinkedIn, Jenny Marvin went in and actually said that the auction has been acting like this for many years now. So then for me, I go back and go, well, who was supposed to tell me?
Well, and so that's when you said that, I was like, I've seen this happen for years. So, I think that was the interesting thing. And then also, I remember hearing from my Google rep, like, if you do XYZ, you will show up in more auctions. Like, that's what they would say.
When they said that, I always ran the assumption that it meant in the auction, not multiple auctions in one query.
Right.
My understanding of auctions was always one query, one auction,
Yes.
not
I
one
totally
query,
agree.
multiple
I
auctions.
totally agree.
And like, even though, yeah, we can say, yeah, we've seen this kind of play out a little bit over the years. And yeah, I've like, for me, I have too, but I always just assumed it was a random little test that they were doing. And now to have Jenny sit there and be like, no, this is how our auctions have been running for several years, to only realize that they only updated the explanation just maybe a couple days ago, maybe a week ago, just seems a little suspect to me.
Yeah.
It just doesn't feel like it's just not a great feeling. It makes me trust them even less, which is not great. And then fully knowing that they've been testing this double serving ad format for a couple of months now, even though like before it used to be like kind of a little bit of a glitch, is also incredibly concerning. So all of it, when I look at it from timeline wise, I'm like, I kind of see what you're doing here is a play for more money, it seems like. Because I don't see how this would benefit advertisers to be shown in the same query multiple times. Our numbers are going to be completely thrown off. Then how do we optimize? You're completely kind of changing the game on us, right?
Yeah, I mean, like even Chat GPT, or not Chat GPT, sorry, Gemini, its own search engine says that. It's like they're going to get more competitive. You can't understand auction insights anymore. And I feel like it's a little bit like, you type in a query as a searcher and it's like, all right, get them to click here. Okay, they didn't click here. Get them to click again. Get them, we're nagging them over and over again on the SERP, essentially, with the same advertisements.
Which might just create negative like feelings, right? Like we've known that in Meta for a really long time. If you start seeing a frequency of like 3, 4, you're just in there going,
right,
maybe
yeah,
too high.
frequency capping.
Yeah. So then we sit there and we look at that. So then it's the same thing on this end where it's like, are we going to be able to frequency cap ourselves? Could we just have it at 1 if we wanted it at 1? Are we allowed to have that? But like at this current moment, it's outside of our control. So I don't even know if any of our clients are being double served.
Yeah.
There's no one, like, unless I'm actually physically going into, well, not physically, but going into Google and checking multiple times and only inflating our numbers on that end too, will I actually be able to figure that out?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say the main takeaway is we no longer have the 1-to-1 ratio with searches and impressions. That's really what it comes down
And
to.
I think that's where a lot of clients need to understand it a little bit more, where it's not going to be or 2 impressions is not 2 people. It might be 1.
Correct. Yeah. And I like how we've sort of summed that up, right? Whether or not you understand the auction, because it is confusing even to those of us who studied the auction all day, right? Like that's what we have been studying, is how the auction works and taking what Google says, what we know from experience about how the auction works, and frankly, what was published in a lot of the class action suits, and then taking that and putting that into our strategy. That's our core expertise. And now it's like, how do you sum that up? And what you sum up is, to the advertiser that's not running their ads and is looking to learn more, it is no longer 1-to-1. person
Yeah.
searches, your ad shows. It's one-to-many relationship, which
Yeah.
changes your what we call diagnostic metrics and adds more nuance to it.
Yeah. It basically does. It just made our jobs a little bit harder. And I feel like this is kind of like an interesting way to weed out maybe less experienced advertisers in a way, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But then I also like, and part of me is like, yeah, great. Now those like really horrible agencies are going to be somewhat held to account. Like they're not going to be able to answer that question, right? So like eventually at some point they're going to be held to account, like accountable. I'm hoping, maybe, I don't know. But then it just kind of sucks for like those new advertisers that are just new in the field, where they're going to be sitting there going, okay, everything I've learned is saying 1-to-1,
Yes.
and now it's completely different. And now everybody, all my colleagues are sitting here going, we're trying to figure this out with you. That's kind of a shitty learning curve for them. I feel for those folks. I wouldn't want to be entering this. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be entering the industry right now.
Say that all the time, but I love new people. So
Mm-hmm.
Lordy. All right. Well, that was a fantastic episode. So if you have any comments and you're watching this and you're confused, feel free to reach out to us in the comments or on our socials. Ameet and I are both heavily on LinkedIn. By all means, ask the questions. And if you don't know the answer or just want to talk about it, that's why we're here, because we have to have these philosophical conversations about our industry at this point. All right. Bye.
Bye.